Daniel's hand froze on the rifle trigger. Through the frost-covered window, a massive white shape pressed against the station's crimson door. Not prowling, not circling, just standing there, one enormous paw lifting to tap the reinforced glass. Once, twice, 3 times. He grabbed the tranquilizer rifle from its wall mount and moved toward the entrance panel, his boots echoing on the metal floor. Through the observation window, he could see her clearly. Now, a polar bear. Huge, even by Arctic standards. Her black eyes locked onto his. Her legs trembled. She sank slowly to her knees, her swollen belly dragging across the ice and leaving a dark, wet streak. Daniel's thumb moved to the rifle's safety, clicking it off. Then back on, then off again. His other hand hovered over the red emergency release button. The bear's head lowered until her muzzle touched the ground. Her breathing created thick clouds of vapor that obscured the glass. He pressed the button. The hydraulic locks disengaged with a hiss. Arctic air flooded the vestibule, so cold it burned his throat. The bear didn't charge through the opening. She crawled forward with agonizing slowness, each movement clearly causing pain. One massive paw scraped the metal grating, then another. She made it 2 meters inside, and her legs gave out completely. She collapsed onto her side with an impact that shook the walls. Daniel sealed the outer door and spun the heating dial to maximum. Yellow warming lamps flickered to life overhead. He set the rifle against the wall and approached slowly, dropping to one knee beside her. Water pooled beneath her body, spreading across the floor. Ice crystals clung to her muzzle and whiskers. Her ribs pressed visibly against her matted fur with each breath. The bear's body suddenly became rigid. Her muscles contracted in a wave that rippled from shoulders to hindquarters. A low groan escaped her throat. Her hind legs kicked out, claws scraping metal. Blood and fluid mixed with the water on the floor, spreading in a widening pool. Another contraction hit, stronger than the first. The bear's head jerked back, her mouth opening wide in silent agony. She was pushing, her entire body straining, but nothing was moving. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, almost a panting. Daniel ran to the medical supply cabinet, yanked open the green metal door, and grabbed handfuls of sterile towels. He tore through plastic packaging as he ran back, towels falling from his arms. He knelt behind the bear and spread the towels across his lap. Something dark appeared at the birth canal. A cub, stuck halfway. The bear's breathing turned into a wet rattle. Daniel dropped the remaining towels and reached forward with both hands. His fingers made contact with something warm and impossibly slippery. He gripped as carefully as he could and waited. The bear's muscles tightened again. She pushed with what little strength remained. Daniel pulled gently, steadily, matching her rhythm. The cub's shoulders emerged, then its tiny torso. With one final effort, the newborn slid completely free into his waiting hands. The cub lay motionless across his palms. Its body was covered in membrane and birth fluid. Through the sparse white fur, he could see skin that was turning from pink to blue-gray. The miniature chest wasn't moving. No sound came from its mouth. Daniel glanced at the mother. Her eyes were closed, her sides heaving. She hadn't moved to look at her newborn. Daniel grabbed a dry towel and began rubbing the cub's body with firm strokes, moving from head to tail. 10 seconds passed. The cub remained limp. 20 seconds. Still nothing. Daniel pressed 2 fingers against the tiny ribcage and pumped in a steady rhythm. 30 seconds. The small body stayed completely still, the skin darkening further. Daniel brought the cub to his face and blew air into its mouth and nose, then resumed rubbing with increased urgency. 40 seconds ticked by. His arms burned, but he kept going. The tiny chest suddenly twitched, just once. Then the miniature mouth opened and a sound pierced the air, high, sharp, furious. The cub squealed again, louder, its little paws beginning to flail. Daniel placed the squealing newborn beside the mother's muzzle. Her ear rotated toward the sound. One eye cracked open halfway, glazed and unfocused. She sniffed weakly at the cub but made no move to lick it. The mother's body was seized again, her spine arched violently. Her legs went completely rigid. This contraction was even more powerful than the previous ones, lifting her massive frame slightly off the floor before it slammed back down. Daniel stared at her belly as it rippled and contracted beneath the skin. His eyes widened. There was another one. The second birth happened fast. The mother found strength from somewhere deep and pushed with everything left in her. Within minutes, the second cub emerged and slid onto the floor. Daniel scooped it up immediately. Same size, same sparse fur, same tiny claws. But this one wasn't moving at all. Daniel cleared the airway with his finger and grabbed a fresh towel. He rubbed the small body hard, his movements bordering on frantic. He pumped the miniature chest with 2 fingers, counting each compression silently. 1 minute passed. The cub remained still, its skin taking on a deeper blue tint. Daniel kept working, rubbing and pumping, but the small body grew colder. He stopped. His shoulders sagged. He stared down at the lifeless cub for 3 long breaths. Then he lifted it and placed it directly against the mother's muzzle, positioning it between her front paws. The mother's eyes opened fully, both of them, focusing with visible effort on the motionless bundle. She sniffed once, then again more deeply. Her gaze changed. She dragged her massive head upward, the movement clearly costing her everything. Her tongue emerged, and she began licking the cub with rough, purposeful strokes. From head to tail, again, again. She didn't pause and rest. Daniel sat back against the wall. He watched without moving, barely breathing. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The cub remained motionless beneath the relentless attention. 45 seconds, a full minute. The mother kept licking, her movements becoming more vigorous, more insistent. At 1 minute and 20 seconds, the cub's back leg twitched. The movement was tiny, but unmistakable. The mother's licking intensified, her tongue massaging the small ribcage. The cub's chest trembled, its mouth opened slightly. A weak sound emerged, then a stronger squeak. The miniature paws jerked. The head turned blindly. Then, a full cry erupted, loud and demanding. The mother continued licking both cubs, her movements slow but gentle. The newborns squealed and crawled awkwardly toward her belly, their noses poking through wet fur. The first cub moved with surprising coordination. The second wobbled and tumbled, but it was moving. It was alive. Daniel remained on the floor for hours, his back against the cold wall. He checked vital signs periodically, but mostly just watched. The cubs found nipples and began nursing with small, satisfied sounds. But the mother's sides had sunken inward even more. Her ribs stood out like ridges beneath her drying fur. Night fell. The cubs whined constantly despite nursing, their cries thin and desperate. Daniel stood slowly and walked to the small pantry. He opened the freezer compartment. 1 can of vegetable soup sat on the top shelf. 1 box of crackers, half empty. 3 frozen Arctic char on the bottom rack. Daniel pulled out all 3 fish and set them on the counter. He looked at the calendar mounted above the sink. Today's date had a red circle with supply ship arrival written in his handwriting, stamped across it in bold letters. Delayed, engine failure. No new date provided. Daniel looked at the single can of soup, then at the 3 fish already beginning to defrost. He ran them under warm water and carried all 3 into the vestibule. He slid them across the floor toward the bear's muzzle. The soup and crackers stayed behind in the pantry. At first, the bear didn't react. Then her nostrils flared. Her eyes opened slowly, her head lifted. She opened her jaws and took the first fish, chewing with mechanical slowness, but she ate all 3 fish over the next hour, her movements gradually becoming less labored. She drank deeply from the water bowl Daniel placed nearby. The cub's frantic whining began to quiet. Daniel moved to the adjacent sleeping quarters, leaving the connecting door open. Throughout the night, he woke to the sounds of cubs squealing and the mother's quiet vocalizations. Each time he checked, the family appeared stable. Morning light filtered through frosted windows. Daniel pulled on his orange parka and heavy boots. He grabbed his rifle and an ice drill. The water reserves were critically low. He needed to check the fishing nets along the northern shore. He stepped out into air that burned his lungs, -35 according to the thermometer. He walked across packed snow, following marker flags toward the northern coastline. After roughly a kilometer, he reached the spot where his net should have been. Daniel stopped. Where thick ice should have extended into the distance, there was only open water, black ocean water, steaming slightly where it met frigid air. The massive ice shelf he'd documented for years was completely gone. He pulled out his map and spread it against his chest. The map showed solid ice extending nearly a mile from shore. Daniel looked at the reality open water lapping against a newly formed, unstable edge. He pulled a red marker from his pocket and drew a large X over the area where the ice shelf used to be, where the bear's denning site had been. Daniel stared at the dark water. He turned and looked back toward the research station in the distance. He looked down at the water again, then back at the station. He folded the map and put it away. He walked along the new coastline and found his backup nets 200 meters south. They contained 2 small fish. He kept the smaller one and placed the larger in his pack. When he returned to the station, the mother was still lying in the same position. The cubs were nestled against her belly, making small snoring sounds. Her ear swiveled toward his footsteps, but she didn't raise her head. Daniel placed the fish near her muzzle. She began eating, her jaw working more steadily than yesterday. The cubs continued nursing, their bellies looking slightly rounder. Milk production had started. The next 2 days passed in careful rhythm. Daniel rationed his soup and crackers, each meal smaller than his body wanted. He brought the bear whatever fish he could catch, never enough, but something. Each time he approached, he moved slowly and deliberately. The bear watched him with dark, intelligent eyes, allowing him to help. The cubs changed rapidly. Their eyes opened, revealing tiny black slits that gradually widened. Their fur thickened. They attempted to walk on unsteady legs, constantly tumbling and bumping noses. Their squeaks evolved into demanding squeals. On the 3rd morning, the radio crackled. Static, then a voice. Station 7. This is the supply vessel Northern Star. Repairs complete. En route to your position. ETA, 4 hours. Confirm receipt. Daniel grabbed the transmitter. Northern Star. This is Station 7. Confirmed. Be advised polar bear with newborn cubs inside the main vestibule. Require veterinary assistance. Is Dr. Mitchell on board? A long pause. Station 7. Can you repeat that? You heard correctly. Mitchell on board? Affirmative. Mitchell is here. See you in 4. Northern Star out. The supply ship appeared on the horizon 4 hours later. It secured its moorings, and 6 people disembarked. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stepped off first, carrying reinforced medical cases. Daniel led them directly to the vestibule. Sarah's eyes widened at the sight of the massive bear with 2 nursing cubs. But her hands moved immediately, setting down cases and pulling out equipment. She approached slowly, speaking in low tones, and began her examination. She worked methodically. Vital signs, eyes, teeth, sides. The cubs squealed when Sarah picked them up, their tiny voices protesting. She was gentle but thorough, checking reflexes, examining eyes and ears, feeling their small bodies. The mother's eyes tracked Sarah's hands, but her muscles stayed relaxed. 30 minutes later, Sarah stood. Mother's recovering well, hydration improving, temperature normal, no infection. Cubs are healthy, good weight, strong reflexes, no complications. Ready for release within 48 hours. Released where? The team gathered around the table, spreading topographical maps. Daniel pointed to the northern shore, then traced his finger across the large X he'd marked. Original denning site is gone. Ice shelf calved off. What remains is unstable. Marcus Webb, a younger researcher, studied the maps carefully. He tapped the southern coast, Southern Bay, more protected coastline. Thicker ice, more stable. Seals have been moving there, good hunting. Rock formations here and here for denning. Multiple breathing holes. Daniel measured the distance, 20 kilometers, far enough for minimal disturbance. Close enough to monitor? Everyone nodded. The next morning, they prepared for transport. Sarah administered a mild sedative to the mother, enough for calm, not enough to impair awareness. They constructed a sled from canvas and reinforced wood, lined with thick colored blankets. Moving the mother required all 6 working together, lifting in coordination. The cubs squealed in distress when separated, their paws scrabbling air, but once reunited on the sled, wrapped in blankets against their mother's warmth, they settled. The mother rumbled low in her chest, but didn't resist. They secured everything and hitched the sled to a reinforced snowmobile. Daniel took the driver's seat. The engine roared, and they began moving across the frozen landscape. The journey took nearly 4 hours. They traveled slowly, avoiding questionable ice, stopping every 30 minutes to check the family. The cubs slept mostly, occasionally waking to squeal and nurse. The mother remained alert but calm, her eyes tracking the changing terrain. When they reached the southern bay, Daniel saw why Marcus had chosen it. High cliffs created natural windbreaks. Thick ice extended far into the ocean, solid beneath the snowmobile. Multiple dark spots marked breathing holes, perfect hunting grounds. Among coastal rocks, several natural depressions would make ideal dens. Snow had drifted against the rocks for additional insulation. This was a place where a bear family could thrive. The team unhooked the sled and retreated 50 meters. The mother lay completely still for several minutes, her eyes scanning. Then slowly, deliberately, she rose to her feet. She shook her entire body, ice and snow flying from her fur in a white cloud. She swayed slightly, testing her balance. Her nose lifted, nostrils flaring as she analyzed scents on the wind. The cubs immediately began squealing, their voices carrying clearly across the frozen bay. They scrambled toward her, paws slipping on blankets. The mother lowered her head and sniffed each cub carefully, her large nose nearly covering their tiny bodies. She checked them from head to tail. Then she turned her massive head toward the group of humans in the distance. Her gaze locked with Daniel's across the expanse of snow. They remained like that for several heartbeats. The bear's dark eyes held him. Then she turned away. She lowered her head and carefully took one cub by the scruff in her jaws. The cub went immediately limp and quiet. She walked toward the nearest rocks, moving with purpose. The second cub remained on the blankets, squealing desperately. Its tiny head swiveled, trying to locate its family. The mother deposited the first cub in a sheltered spot among rocks, then returned. She picked up the second cub with the same careful grip, and it too fell silent. Within moments, the family had disappeared behind snowdrifts and rock. Only a trail of paw prints remained in pristine snow. The team stood silently. Sarah touched Daniel's shoulder briefly, then turned toward the snowmobiles. Marcus and the others followed. Daniel stood alone for another minute, looking at the spot where the family had vanished. Then he turned, climbed onto his snowmobile, and started the engine. The convoy began the journey back to the station. As they traveled, Daniel looked back once. The cliffs and rocks stood silent, keeping their secrets. The snowmobiles disappeared over the horizon, engine sounds fading into vast white silence. Behind them, in a sheltered den among rocks, a mother bear curled around 2 sleeping cubs and finally allowed herself to rest. If you were Daniel, standing in that freezing station with only 3 fish left, would you have made the same choice? Let us know in the comments. And if this story gave you even a fraction of the hope it gave me, subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of people who believe animals like this polar bear family deserve our protection. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to watch until the end.